Good afternoon, and thank you for continuing to cover Tropical Storm Barry, which is, as you all know, will make landfall tomorrow morning along the central coast in Louisiana near Morgan City as a hurricane. We just completed a briefing of the Unified Command Group. A few updates. First of all, last night, President Trump approved the request that I made for a pre-landfall federal disaster declaration, and I certainly want to thank him on behalf of all the people in Louisiana for his quick action on that. And I want to thank all of our federal partners who are supporting our response to Tropical Storm Barry and our continued flood fight here in Louisiana. I do also want you to know that we now have Tony Robinson, who is the FEMA Region 6 coordinator. He is here with us in Baton Rouge on the ground. In fact, he's been with me for the last couple of hours, and he'll stay here for some period to come. Today, I also issued an executive order relaxing the size and weight restrictions for commercial motor carriers traveling through the state for emergency preparedness and disaster relief efforts. Yesterday, I was able to get out and visit with parish leaders in the New Orleans area to include New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell, Plaquemines Parish Kirk Lepine, Plaquemines Parish President Kirk Lepine, also St. Bernard Parish President Guy McGinnis, and Jefferson Parish President Mike Yenny as well. Then in the afternoon, I was able to get to Morgan City and visit with the St. Mary Parish officials. This morning, before the Unified Command Group, we had a conference call with parish presidents from the Acadiana region to make sure that we are addressing their needs and that they're fully informed as to what they can expect. And then this afternoon, because of the track of the storm that continues north after it makes landfall, it obviously is intending to, we believe it will pick up speed, and the rainfall totals won't be as significant in the north, but they're going to be significant enough that to pose a real threat. We will be reaching out to leaders in North Louisiana, and particularly Northeast Louisiana, based on what we've been told to expect in terms of rainfall totals. Also later today, I'll have leaders from the capital area, including Mayor Broome and other parish presidents, meet here at GOSAP to discuss their needs and make sure that they have access to all the information that they need. And we anticipate that there will be a press availability subsequent to that meeting. As you know, Tropical Storm Barry is slowly strengthening and organizing and slowly moving. Winds are currently at 65 miles per hour. Our coast has already begun to experience some tropical storm force winds this morning. The track has moved slightly west with landfall currently expected still around the Morgan City area. However, the cone is very large, and if you look at the area of the state of Louisiana that will experience tropical storm winds, it basically is the entire coast of Louisiana, and we believe that those tropical storm force winds will be felt as far north as Alexandria. This is still, however, going to be a very major rain event for much of the state, but for those areas in and around Morgan City where we expect the storm to come ashore, it's also going to be a wind event. However, when the ground is fully saturated, as it will soon be in Louisiana, it doesn't take much wind, as you all know, to cause a tree to fall or a utility pole to fall, and so these hazards, I think, are going to present themselves all over the state, and we need to be prepared for that. We also need to be prepared for widespread power outages that won't be remedied as quickly as we would like, because we have to make sure the conditions are safe in order to deploy the workers necessary to make the repairs. So the lack of electricity in many areas, and we can't predict where that's going to happen and how long it's going to exist, but that is another threat of this storm that people need to take into consideration as they make their preparations. We are looking at 10 to 20 inches of rain, with some areas possibly receiving 25 inches, depending upon the storm track. And as you know, these rain bands, we don't know exactly how far out they're going to spread. We don't know the intervals between periods of heavy rain. We don't know whether there's going to be time for some of the rain to drain, and so we really have to be extremely prepared for a very major rain event across much of Louisiana. We do have an updated evacuation, and that is Lower Lafourche down around Port Fourchon. That is a mandatory evacuation. There remains mandatory evacuations in Jefferson Parish, at the town of the Grand Isle, lower lying Lafitte, Crown Point, and Barataria. Also in Plaquemines Parish, the entire East Bank remains under mandatory evacuation. And on the West Bank, Oakville to Venice is under mandatory evacuation. We also have now, as of about 45 minutes ago, at least that's when we learned of it, there's a voluntary evacuation for the entire parish of St. Mary, starting at noon today. As we speak, the jail in St. Mary Parish is in the process of evacuating, and those inmates will be evacuating to Angola. For the first time in history, all floodgates on the Mississippi River, or I should say within the hurricane risk reduction system in the New Orleans area, are sealed off with those floodgates being closed. One of the speakers who will come behind me shortly will be Chip Klein, the chairman of the CPRA, and he will give you all more information on that. The forecast for the Mississippi River in New Orleans remains at 19 feet at the Carrollton Gauge. That's the same as it was yesterday. It remains the case that we do not expect any overtopping of the levees along the Mississippi River, and so that remains good news. We do expect to have to conduct search and rescue missions. We therefore have 3,000 National Guardsmen in place with various pieces of equipment to include numerous high-water vehicles, as well as over 300 buses staged in 3 vehicle staging areas, including Zephyr Field and Lamar Dixon and Ascension Parish, and then over in Lafayette. You'll be hearing from General Curtis in just a little bit to talk a little bit more about how the National Guard is arrayed, and then you'll hear from Secretary Sean Wilson to talk a little bit about the vehicles as well. We do have a mega shelter in Alexandria that is fully staged, and we can open it just as soon as we choose to do that. That facility will be opened in order to receive those individuals who are rescued in our search and rescue operations, should that be necessary. It is critical that everybody out there monitor the situation, stay informed, get updates, and heed the advice of local authorities. We have received reports today of individuals around South Louisiana, but especially in the New Orleans area, who are sightseeing along the levees and sometimes driving with various vehicles. Obviously, that is not wise and appropriate at this point in time, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure people don't do that. First of all, it's dangerous, and it's going to become increasingly more dangerous, but also because the levees have been inundated for so long, especially in certain areas, it's just not good for the levees either. As I say at every possible opportunity, please do not drive through standing water if you are not absolutely certain that you can safely do so. Most fatalities that we have experienced here in Louisiana over the last several years from flood events happen when individuals drive in standing water. The water is deeper than they thought it would be, and in many cases there's also current that is not perceptible to them. So be patient. Don't do that. I also want to reiterate that no one should take this storm lightly, and I keep using this as a benchmark. You just go back to 2016 when we didn't have a named storm. We didn't have all of the advance warning that we've had today, and we had 56 out of 64 parishes declared a major federal disaster because of those floods. Nobody should take this storm lightly just because it's supposed to be a Category 1. when it makes landfall. The real danger in this storm was never about the wind anyway. It's always been about the rain, and that remains a very significant threat. So stay alert, monitor your local news for developments, follow the directions of local officials, and I keep doing this, making a plug for getagameplan.org. If you haven't done it, go to getagameplan.org. It will tell you what you need to do to protect you and your family. And I would also encourage you to check 511la.org for the latest information on road closures. That information is real time. That's 511la.org. Our next UCG meeting will be tomorrow at 11, and we will send out that notice as soon as possible, and therefore we're expecting to be back with you all tomorrow at about 12:30 as well. That should be after landfall of the hurricane, and we should be getting our first reports about then as to what's happening across the state of Louisiana. So at this time, I'm going to be followed by General Curtis of the National Guard. He'll be followed by Secretary Wilson, DOTD, then Marquita Walters of the Department of Children and Family Services, and finally CPRA Chairman Chip Klein. Once Chip speaks, we will take questions if you have them, and you can address the questions to any of the individuals who are standing here with me. So at this point, General Curtis, if you'll come on up.
Okay. Thank you, Governor. As the Governor mentioned, at his direction, we have mobilized approximately 3,000 guardsmen. We have them set across the state of Louisiana. Our focus right now is in the greater New Orleans area, basically the Florida parishes or the North Shore through Baton Rouge, and then kind of in Acadiana. But we have soldiers, equipment arrayed all the way across South Louisiana with high water vehicles, boats, and other engineer type equipment. Pre-landfall, we continue to do shoring up levee operations, assisting with evacuation. We have security available should it be needed, but our main focus at this point is getting ready for the post-landfall, and in the immediate aftermath, or as soon as the storm passes, we will be ready to conduct search and rescue. Again, high water vehicles, boats, and helicopters. We have helicopters that are located in Hammond that are available to the southeastern side, and then we've moved helicopters over to Lake Charles and some up in Alexandria that would be available to respond into more of the central Louisiana or south central Louisiana portion. Along with search and rescue, we will be prepared to conduct shelter security type operations, commodities distribution, follow-on security missions, and then any other requests that come in from the parishes that we can provide.
Thank you very much, General.
Sure.
Thank you, Governor. A couple of big points that we would share with you considering evacuations or starting to increase, whether they be voluntary or mandatory evacuations. The department will typically begin closing movable bridges before the winds get too high and before the water rises, just from a mechanical standpoint. So it's important for you to plan your routes early and make those plans such that you can get through before they are closed. We actually had someone outside of a closed gate last night that caused us to have to go back to a mandatorily closed area, unlock it, and let them through. So that's a concern for us, particularly as we get closer to the timeline when the winds and the water reach ashore. The importance of pre-planning your evacuation: make sure that you fuel early. While we do have motor assist patrol on the roads 24 hours a day, it's important to plan because we want to minimize congestion points. And speaking of congestion points, we tell people all the time, on that simple 511 app, you can see there's not a lot of congestion, but there are some closures, and it's a very simple tool to use. We use phones all the time as distracted drivers. Get on 511la.org and make sure that you plan your routes early. Thank the governor, because a big part of what happens in these events is about the commerce and what we can get in and out. And so with the executive order waiving the hours of service and the weight restrictions for emergency vehicles or equipment that's coming into these areas, that's going to become very, very critical in a post-storm environment to be able to have the additional fuel and equipment for emergency purposes. For those folks who are traveling through Louisiana, We have closed the Toomey Rest Area west of Lafayette, right when you enter from Texas. That's important because that's a low-lying area. Typically, it works perfectly for welcoming visitors, but we want to make sure that we don't have visitors when it's underwater. And then last but not least, we have school buses positioned at the VSA, which is right outside the airport in Lafayette, as well as Zephyr. We've got 140 school buses with drivers from Lang. We've got 175 coaches inbound to Louisiana. A good portion of them are already on the ground. Will be here before close of business today, and that includes ADA accessible coaches. So with the paratrans and with those coaches, know that we are prepared to move folks as quickly as possible. And the last piece of information is that we have pre-tasked our debris haulers, anticipating the rolling effect of this, as the governor's talked about. Should we need debris haulers and be able to do post-event recovery, we have already pulled the trigger to begin to deal with those issues after the storm. So with that, Governor, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. As people are beginning to truly understand the severity of this storm, we have shelters opening rapidly across the state. I want the most important piece of information is for you to think local. Talk, look, listen to your parish emergency operations centers and follow their direction about what shelters are open in each parish. And if you have any questions or any confusion, call 211. That contract has been turned on, and you can, 211 has up-to-date, immediate knowledge of every shelter open in the state. So if you have any confusion, any questions, call 211 and you'll get that information directly from them.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. So yesterday, you all were given an update that we were in the process of working with the flood authorities around the greater New Orleans area to close off all of the major floodgates around the hurricane protection system. We just gave the directive to the local flood authorities here in the last few minutes to go ahead and completely seal off all of the major floodgates, to close all major floodgates. So this will be the first time in the history since that system has been constructed that we will have all floodgates closed, and we intend to operate the Western Closure Complex, which is the largest pump station in the world, in addition to some of those permanent pump stations that were installed after Katrina along the London and possibly the 17th Street Canal. Yesterday we had thought we were going to leave the floodgates open along the lakefront, the Bonneville, Williams, and the floodgate, the floodgate along the lakefront airport. But as I just said, we're going to go ahead and close off all of these things. We're not going to take any chances here, as well as in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes. There are 3 remaining floodgates in Morganza to the Gulf Hurricane Protection System, in the LaRose to Golden Meadow Hurricane Protection System. All of those gates will be closed by this afternoon. And so as far as operating the hurricane protection systems around the state, we are doing everything we can and should be doing.
Thank you very much, Chip. And just before we take questions, we are intending to have, insofar as is possible, the state postured tonight before it gets dark the way we want to face this storm. I'm encouraging everybody out there to assume the same posture. So if you're in one of the areas at risk, which is a huge portion of South Louisiana, tonight be where you want to be and have what you need to have on hand in order to protect yourselves and your family. We do have U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy, who is here with us. I'm going to invite you if you want to make some comments.
Thank you, Governor. I was in the audience listening and struck by the preparations made. So thank you and your staff, General Marquita, Secretary, thank you for your preparations. I'm sure, as you know, but the federal delegation, Senator Kennedy, I, Garrett Graves, others, have sent a letter to the President. He has already approved federal resources, financial resources for communities. And I say that even though we know it, just to say that this is a state and federal teamwork. And the President and the administration is committed to helping us. I, again, thank you all. And I've been calling local officials, saying that whatever we can do on a federal level to help them, we will make ourselves available. And if after the storm, folks are affected and they have problems with their federal agencies, again, please contact us. Hopefully you won't, but if you do. And Governor, thank you for the
Thank you
opportunity.
very much, very much. With that, we're going to take questions. We'll stick with our normal pattern. Greg, you're first.
What are the experts telling you about how fast this will move? I mean, more than 2 feet of water dumps in some areas.
Yeah, well, first of all, the rainfalls that we experience are going to accumulate in about 24 hours. One of the problems here is the storm is moving very slowly, and that's why there will be so much rainfall. And again, the way these things work with the rain bands that come off the Gulf and circulate, it's impossible to know exactly where the heaviest rains will fall. But we're expecting the rain to happen within about a 24-hour period. And when you talk 10 to 20 inches of rain, I mean, that is very, very significant. So we talked a lot about the Mississippi River, for example, but we have a lot of other rivers across the North Shore and west of the Mississippi River as well. And we expect a number of these to be at flood stage very quickly and to cause significant problems. It's impossible to say which ones. Because we don't know where that rain is going to fall and feed into those rivers, but this is something that everyone needs to be cognizant of, and certainly if we get more information about a more specific forecast, we're going to make sure that people have access to that information. Yes, sir.
About that is that the Amite and Comite River Basin, it looks like that it's going to be falling right on top of that.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything that you can do and prepare so we don't have what we had in 2016 happen again?
Well, first of all, we don't expect the rain, and this has come from the National Weather Service, and in my conversations with state climatologist Jay Grimes. We don't expect the rainfalls that would feed into those rivers, and you specifically mentioned the Amite and the Covite, to be what they were in 2016. However, it is still going to be a very significant rain event. We believe there will be flooding in Baton Rouge, in Livingston Parish, and Ascension Parish. And how far that goes east really depends upon the track of the storm and whether it continues to move further west, and then how far out the rain bands circulate and so forth. But we have particular concerns about those rivers, and then other rivers when you go west across the other side of the Mississippi River as well. So, I mean, what was the rest of your question?
Have you done anything particular to prepare for the Atchafalaya flooding or the Amite or the Comite so that we don't have the same thing that happened in 2016 happen?
Well, I mean, gravity works as gravity works, and I can't tell you that we're not going to have flooding. In fact, I can tell you that we will. We don't believe it will be as extensive in 2016, but I don't want anybody to interpret my comments as meaning that they don't need to prepare and so forth. Yes, ma'am.
The Bonnie Carey Spillway, has that also been closed? And can
No.
you
The-
talk
what-
about the decision not to open Morganza Spillway and how that is appropriate, especially with the track of the storm?
Okay. So real quickly, and I do have Colonel Murphy here. The Bonnie Carey Spillway is operating just as it was before the storm, and Colonel Murphy will be able to explain that. The Morganza has not been opened, and one of the reasons would be that were we to open it, were it to be opened, because it's the Corps of Engineers, it's not the state of Louisiana, you would then be sending water into the Morgan City area, which is exactly where the storm track has been indicating the worst of the winds, the worst of the rains were going to go. And so that would not be appropriate. Secondly, it wouldn't be done in time to give any assistance to downriver, because the water levels downriver wouldn't fall because of the Morganza being operational until after this event was over anyway. So I'm sure he's got more information, and it is a core function. So I'm going to ask Colonel Murphy, who is the commander of the New Orleans District of the Corps of Engineers, to come up and expound on that or correct it if necessary.
No, thank you, Governor. We've actually been hearing that question quite a lot, so can't say I appreciate it. But right now we're pushing 100,000 cubic feet per second through Bonnet Carré because we've been at flood stage for, I think, 270 days now. So the district has been at 24/7 operations monitoring this for the last 4 months now. But because the river's at flood stage, there's no plans to change the current operation. But as far as opening Morganza or Bonnet Carré, I think there's a misperception, much like the governor said, that either of those structures are like an ejection seat, that you punch the button and immediately we see river levels drop in the greater New Orleans area, and that's not the case. With Morganza, typically there's a 10-day prep because we operate these structures on behalf of the public, to protect the public. And so you have to have 10 days to allow wildlife and humans, everybody affected downstream, to go, and then we typically do a 3-day opening again for the very same reason. So 10 days from now, we wouldn't see an effect. And the same thing with Bonnet Carré. It takes about a day and a half, well, really 2 days to open Bonnet Carré the rest of the way. So by the time that we would see any effect, and really my engineers have estimated that the effect would be relatively minimal here in the greater New Orleans area. So really it's a timing issue right now, but even we operate the structures according to engineering and science based on, hey, here's what we know the river does and here's the impacts. And just like the governor said, it's about risk transference. Where do we accept the risk? So thank you, Governor.
Thank you. And I'll follow up with a restatement. Since yesterday morning, we have not been told to expect any water from the river to overtop the levees anywhere in the river. And before that, we had some period of time where we were concerned, but that was limited to Lower Plaquemines Parish, and even that now is off the table in terms of what we've been told to expect. Yes, sir.
Governor, are we better prepared for Tropical Storm Barry than we were for Katrina, Gustav, any of the other major storms that we've been impacted by in the last decade?
Yeah, I don't think there is any question about that, and we're better prepared from a number of aspects. But first among them is the very generous effort that was made by the American people to invest in Louisiana, particularly the hurricane risk reduction system in and around New Orleans. The levees are stronger than they have ever been. The system is tighter than it has ever been. We had a flood event in New Orleans a couple of days ago when they received a torrential downpour in a very short period of time. 118 out of 120 pumps worked. The electricity generation happened without a hitch. And as a result, that water was removed from the city pretty quickly, considering how much came down. So from those perspectives and many others, I don't have any hesitancy whatsoever to tell you our state is better prepared. But that comes with a caveat. You never know what Mother Nature is going to serve until she has served it. And so this is going to be a big storm across much of Louisiana. And based on the current forecast of what we can expect and where the heaviest rain is going to fall, we don't expect this to be primarily a New Orleans event. This is going to be an event that primarily affects Louisiana west of New Orleans.
Governor,
Yes, ma'am.
can you talk about the importance or why it's necessary to seek the federal disaster declaration ahead of time?
Yeah. So what the disaster declaration does for us that was made by President Trump last night is it allows us to call upon the federal government, all of our federal partners, for assistance and get that assistance moving so that we can better protect life and property. And in fact, we're already seeing that play out. For example, commodities are already moving to Louisiana from our federal partners. We also have a search and rescue team that is coming from Texas, and that is happening because of our federal partners authorizing those assets to move forward. But it's going to play out in a number of ways, and it just helps us. And by the way, this is called direct federal assistance, and it is not assistance that we typically get after the storm once certain monetary thresholds of damages and expenditures can be calculated. And those have to do with public assistance and individual assistance. We're going to get to that stuff later. This is about protecting life and protecting property in the response phase. Well, actually in the preparation and the response phase. And so that's why we asked for it. That's why we appreciate the fact that the president very quickly made that pre-landfall declaration. So that's the assistance that we anticipate that it will provide. Okay, so yes, ma'am, Sue.
Gotta ask one more question. How much is being said in the UCG meetings about the impacts of climate change on this and the fact that we're
Yeah.
having more and more frequent high rainfall events?
Well, that's not a topic for the UCG. It's not an emergency support function for any of our reporting agencies. That's not some, we're talking about protecting life and property and so forth. It is noteworthy that we are in our 260th day of a flood fight on the Mississippi River, the longest in history, and that this is the first time in history a hurricane will strike the state of Louisiana while the Mississippi River has been at flood stage. Because typically, the spring rains and the snow melt flood the river, and then that's flushed out of the system. The river then returns to its normal depth and in time for hurricane season. And so one of the things we have to determine, and this is something that I was able to speak to Colonel Murphy about the other day, is if we anticipate that this could happen with more frequency going forward, then it has to inform a lot of things about what we do in the state of Louisiana to prepare for disasters in the future, but also to inform decision-making and protocols with respect to the Corps of Engineers managing the river and the flood control measures that it takes. So with that, again, we plan to have another Unified Command Group meeting tomorrow at 11, and so we will plan to be back here with you all at 12:30. There will be plenty of information that people need to stay apprised of that will be put out between now and then, so we encourage all of the listeners and watchers out there to be cognizant of that, and we thank you very much again for being here with us today. Appreciate you.